Hello and welcome to episode 99 of the Brass Junkies. We're getting close to 100, dude. It's crazy. Who knew? This is Andrew Hitz, and I am joined by my effervescent and Lance LaDuke.
Quick, get him a thesaurus. That.
I actually thought of a word that would have gone really well with it, but it didn't make sense, and it also wasn't appropriate. So I pulled up, and then I just kept pulling up until
that stopped you.
Well, yeah. Anyway, Lance, how are you today?
I'm now bewildered.
Yeah. Professional podcasters, since we're like 30 seconds in, would just stop and re-record. Nope. You all get to experience the bewilderment that Lance, well, and actually I just did, even though I created it. So we are one episode away from 100, and we were going to have a guest that's now been moved a little bit into the future because of a power outage at the Homestead where Virginia Music Educator Conference was happening, but we did get this interview. We moved it up. So there's always things moving behind the scenes. Have you ever noticed that, Lance?
I do.
Yeah, it's like a lot of that's why it's kind of amazing that we get a lot of help from a lot of people. But like a lot of help. That's how this all works, from interns and from our partner Will Houchin, and we have a lot of help. But yeah, there's a lot of moving parts around here. So, but today's guest is Tom Holtz. He is a legendary tuba player who was in the President's Own Marine Band for a long time and is absolutely one of the best jazz tuba players in the world. And I cannot believe the job that he did breaking down, improvising, and making bass lines. And as you're about to hear, it's mind-blowingly great. It's just all followable. It's like easy to digest. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, it's a master class. And actually, I think Tom wins the prize for having the most disproportionate ratio of talent to humbleness.
Yes.
He's still confused why we asked him to be on the show, I think.
I think so too. Well, and he's a Patreon patron, so he heard the first of what is now a monthly installment for anybody at the $3 and up level, which is the TBJ behind the scenes report. And I talked about who the guest is on episode 100, which has still not been revealed yet. We're going to do a little reveal because it's a really big guest, and then couple of massive guests that we have coming up after that, and he said to me, he mentioned those three names who are all brass legends, and he said, "What the hell am I doing on this podcast?" So, but you're going to hear what he's doing. He's great. So, and he's a dear friend. So, thank you, Tom, for your support, both as a friend and on Patreon. So, patreon.com/thebrassjunkies. We actually have just unveiled, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we have for the different levels. We just revamped all the rewards, and Lance is going to be doing something, I'm not kidding, called the Lance Deep Thoughts by Lance, which is going to be him doing a deep dive on a couple of topics each month. And I'm doing a Jacobs Quotes audio blog, which is going to be me talking about quotes from Arnold Jacobs that I have up on the @JacobsQuotes Twitter account. I'm doing an audio version of my performance and pedagogy blog. Lance is also doing a monthly thing with Music Practice Coach, which is, of course, the name of the incredible book that he wrote on practicing. And then, of course, the bonus episodes that we have every, the in-between weeks every time with the guest that we just featured the previous week. So you can find out more about all of that at patreon.com/thebrassjunkies. And thank you to everyone who has gone there and checked it out. So very quickly, can you tell us about Duquesne?
Duquesne University, the Mary Papert School of Music here in beautiful and sunny Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, has a wonderful, wonderful program, fantastic faculty, most of whom are, I think all of whom are either part of the River City Brass or the Pittsburgh Symphony. You can find out more about all the wonderful going on at Duquesne in the Mary Papert School of Music by clicking on the link in the show notes. And very special thanks not only to Russell Edders for these names, but to Jim NC, the slowest of all novae, also known as a symbiotic novae, staying at maximum light for a decade or more and then fading away very slowly. Thank you, Wikipedia. Nova.
And thank you to Parker Mouthpieces for providing our hosting. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model Tuba mouthpiece and the Lance LaDuke Model Euphonium mouthpiece. If they can make Lance and I sound good, they can make you sound good too. Find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I think if you go to iTunes, leave a rating and review. We would love that. That helps other people find the show. And without further ado, let us get to the conversation with Tom Holtz. And today on the Brass Junkies, we have a guest who is actually one of our Patreon patrons, and he's not a very good musician or brass player, but we like to just, we're just blatantly just letting our Patreon patrons be full featured guests. So, I guess if I think back long enough, he was in the Marine Band, which is, Lance, is that as good as the Air Force Band?
It depends on who you ask.
I'm asking you.
Oh, I think all God's children are wonderful.
Oh, knock it off. So today's guest
Every mama skunk thinks her baby smells the sweet.
Today's guest is one of my dear friends, and Lance puts up with him, and his name is Tom Holtz. Tom, how are you?
How you doing, gentlemen?
Gentlemen,
your
wow.
listeners, you've had all these high-powered guests on, one after another, and everyone's thinking you can't possibly keep your foot on the gas this hard for this long. Well, this is the day that the brakes hit hard, and this podcast hits the wall.
You have been proven true, if that was your theory. Yeah, no, you're.
You're bona fide.
Yeah, you're self-deprecating. But so Tom is not only was in the Marine Band for. Were you in for just 20? I know that's what. No,
after 21 years of service, it says in his bio.
21 and change.
I didn't read the bio. I know him well enough that I just didn't read
21
it.
and change. Why would you change? Tom, don't change.
I think he changed out of his uniform. I don't think he shows up at Oktoberfest gigs wearing his Marine uniform.
I just basically changed uniform. I went from dress blues to lederhosen. So, it's the same thing.
So, Tom
Which one was the Marine Band?
Wait, were you in the American Marine Band, or was it a different Marine Band?
I would sometimes have the lederhosen on underneath the uniform so I could do a quick change and go to a gig.
I did once play. I did once play a solo with the Marine Band of Mexico, and they were quite good. So, I guess there are other Marine bands. I just had always assumed that you were in the American one, but whatever.
I was in the American one.
Yes, and so Tom is straight up one of the best jazz tuba players in the world. He's like frustrating, like most of us who can improvise a little, and then even some of us who can improvise a lot. I'm not the us part there, but use all of the 19 octaves available to us on the tuba, because if you have either non-interesting ideas or semi-interesting ideas, and you can throw a few octave jumps and like pedal notes and all that to keep it interesting. And Holtz here can you could just one octave, like tuning B flat to low B flat. He can say more than just about anybody else on the planet, which is inspiring and infuriating at the same time. So you belong on this podcast, Mr. Holtz.
I learned early on that 19 octaves were not available to me. I only have about 19 notes that I can use.
I thought we were talking to Cradler. Is this isn't Cradler?
So I really have to dial it down and stick with what I can do.
But your improvising is it's less is more. I mean, I love it. It's great, and you do like to, like I said, self-deprecate your tuba abilities, which are incredible. But you can say so much using so few notes and no gimmicks. Can you talk about your approach, other than the fact that you have no high register and you have no low register and you can't multiply, which is all complete bull crap? But can you talk about your approach to improv?
Well, less is more in a lot of instances. I knew that early on that, the massive technique and the massive range was just not going to be my thing. I knew that was going to happen that way. Even in college, I was in a studio at Arizona State, and Dan Parentoni had a rack of students in there that was just phenomenal. Having lunch with one of my buddies a couple of years ago, and he referred to it as we were the 27 Yankees and we didn't even know it. And
I like it.
It was, yeah. And you sit in a studio class with, Jeff Anderson and Tony Niffen and Pat Sheridan, and you realize that, there's a next level there, and you need to really think long and hard about whether you're going to be there. And when the improvising began, there were some examples of some super fast, super high playing out there. And I didn't want to go that route. I knew it would be kind of unproductive, and that there were people out there doing that better than I can. So, and I really wanted to learn how to play inside the chord changes. And I know that seems like it would get boring for a lot of people, just, sticking to basic chords, basic scales. There's still a lot of territory to be explored when you're just playing inside a very simple set of chord changes. And I don't feel like I've explored it all yet, to be honest. So it's fun for me. It's almost like a jigsaw puzzle or a Rubik's Cube, figuring out how I'm going to stay inside a very simple set of chord changes, not do anything really fancy, and still express myself and still create something that's musical and entertaining and interesting.
Do you remember how you got started? So you had this sort of realization that this is going to be the direction I go in, which is already, I think, a way more profound decision than I think a lot of people would consider. But then what was the next? Okay, I'm going to go in that direction. And then what happens tomorrow in the practice room?
I remember the decision. That was easy. It was in college, and I'm looking at all the different avenues. Am I going to be a soloist? Well, there's a bunch of guys here in the studio who play crazy good solos. And am I going to be an orchestral player? My experience with orchestra at that point had been severely limited and really not all that rewarding. So I kind of knew that wasn't the route. When it came time to actually, to take advantage of opportunities to play jazz, I basically just said yes to anything that came along and threw myself to the wolves. And was in high school, and I was not at all prepared for what was about to happen. It was just like a little church event, and there's an old guy down the street played some cornet, and he said, "Yeah, come on, bring your tuba. You're going to play with us." And it was a little 3-piece group: cornet, piano, and me. And I thought there would be music. I was wrong, very wrong, and had to fake my way through an hour of stuff. And it was not at all good. It was scary as all get out. And the other guys seemed to think, "Yeah, it was good, man. Nice job. Way to go." And that was my introduction to it. So once you've done that, once you've just absolutely stepped in the middle of this experience of having to listen to what's going around you and fake it, and just fake it till you make it. Once you've done that for the first time, then it's all downhill from there. That's the toughest it'll ever be. And then when you get in the practice room, you realize that your skills are really, really important. Knowing your scales automatically takes you away from some notes that are going to be dissonant or just not working. And when you're improvising, you set yourself onto a scale, and hey, you've already figured out, you've got yourself a nice limited set of notes to pick from, and you go from there. You further learn in school that those music theory classes, which might be boring you to tears, man, incredibly useful. You're actually learning the building blocks of how a tune is put together, how voice leading works. All the rules of voice leading, there's a whole bunch of them. Everybody remembers if you're a music major, you had to do your counterpoint class and work on your voice leading and your chorale writing and harmonic analysis. All that stuff is what I do, just to put together basic bass line. All those rules apply. I tell everybody that Johann Sebastian Bach would have been the baddest bass player on planet Earth, because all he ever did was make these wonderful lines going through the chords to a destination. And that's the job.
So do you teach improv, or well, that's a question in and of itself. I'll stop talking now.
I do a little bit. I think there's only honestly, I think there's only so much you can do in a lesson setting. You can talk about how the theory works. You can talk about how the scales work. At some point, you basically have to put the horn on the face and go. A lot of what I do is based off of it's reacting both reactively and then reacting proactively, if that's such a phrase, to what's happening around you in the music and making things happen. And it's hard for me to articulate some of this stuff. And, people want to have it like written down or make a video of it so that you can present this material in such a fashion that it works. And then at the end of the day, you still have to hear something and then build something alongside of it, alongside what you hear. And so that's been a challenge for me, is figuring out how to present these ideas in such a way that you can just sit and listen or read about it. Because I haven't found those ways to be particularly effective. The best way to learn has always been to put yourself in a setting and where you have to hear it and make things up as you go and just break it down and do it. I can remember a podcast several episodes ago, and you were talking about Sam putting you on a Dixie Devils gig, and you kept asking, so what do I play? And Sam's response was, yeah, the gig starts at such and such a time. Here's what you wear. Yeah. And that was all the information he gave you. Yeah. That's kind of what it is.
Yep.
So it's like stand-up comedy in that you can't tell if a joke is funny until you're in front of an audience, yeah?
Very much so.
Okay,
very much so.
It seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, because I probably am, but with play-along tracks or iReal B or things like that, you can in some way simulate circumstances without being in front of a crowd. Are there tools that you use or suggest to people if they're trying to learn to do this?
I used the basic Jamie Aebersold tracks to when I was just starting to figure out how to get from A to B, right. And that was kind of where I discovered that it's not just picking notes in the moment for if whatever harmony happens to be happening around you. It's picking notes in the moment that are a line that lead to a chord that's coming 2 or 3 or 4 measures down the road. And then it becomes a matter of picking notes that are happening in the harmony at the moment that will not only lead you to that spot 2 or 3 or 4 chords down the road, but will tell everybody around you, hey, this is the chord we're going to. And it makes it really obvious to everybody what you're doing and where you're going. And that's kind of the goal, is to make it really obvious that, that B flat major chord at the end of the line, that's where I'm headed. And we all know where that's coming from. And when I get to the downbeat and play a B flat, nobody is surprised.
So it's like a jigsaw puzzle that has like multiple solutions, not infinite, but a whole bunch of different solutions.
It is infinite, man. You can do anything when you're walking a bass line.
There you go.
And you can go crazy if you really want to.
Right.
But I decided a long time ago, let's not do that. If we're walking a bass line, right, let's make it obvious what I'm playing as far as chord changes go, make it obvious where those chords are leading. And even if what you're doing doesn't agree at that moment with the music and the playing around you, it's all going to resolve to that spot a couple bars down the road where you're picking it.
So how long from I'm thrown to the wolves in this church gig until you start to feel, I feel like I've had some half-hearted efforts at learning to improvise. I've never really followed through on it. And whenever I've talked to people about it, it's sort of like, well, if you're going to learn to juggle, like you get 3 of something and then you just learn to juggle.
Right.
So what's the step from, or what are the steps, or steps maybe not the right term, so like giant phases, because there's probably like, you were thrown to the wolves and you sort of go, okay, well, they thought it went well, so what went well about that? And then there's a period of time where X is happening, and then there's a period of time where this other thing is happening. Can you does that work in this paradigm? I mean, is there a way for you to define it that way, or is it just so gradual that you just get better each time?
Yeah, you always get better each time. And I think it's going to be different for everyone. If you look at it from the example of juggling, when you're just learning how to juggle, I think some people start gauging their juggling on, okay, I'm going to be throwing the balls at this strength or this velocity, and that makes things work better. Or some people will say, okay, I'm going to throw the balls so that they're all hitting this eye level, this imaginary spot above my eyes. Okay, that seems to work. And it can be, it's juggling. There's a million ways you can go at this. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be different for everyone. I know it's not a horribly concrete answer, but when you're first thrown to the wolves and you're in that gig, you have to come up with what works. And when you're in that moment, okay, wow, there's something happening here. I'm not really sure what to do. You have to, you fall back on whatever you got. Were your ear training skills? Were you good at hearing? Are you good at hearing stuff? Maybe that's where you fall. Were you good at harmonic analysis? Maybe you can understand that there's a 2 chord and a 5 chord coming up, and you start picking your notes that way. But it's different for everyone. But you do get better. You do get better every single time you do it.
Oh, it's a hello. Yes. Is this room 417?
That was
my agent calling.
Yeah, that was. That was his agent asking.
Andy, are you free for a polka gig on next Thursday night, 7:30 to 10?
Yeah, next Thursday night that's Thanksgiving. No.
Why is he booking for Thanksgiving? He's never going to find anybody. Yeah, if he offers $250, I'll take it.
I mean, I've always said that. The 2 dates a year I make the most money per hour are church services on Easter and polka gigs on Thanksgiving. So but I'm already booked. So sorry, Tom.
It's the only polka gig where you're not going to have to eat bratwurst. I'll have turkey and stuffing.
It's turkey sausages.
Oh, don't go there. That's sacrilege.
Turkey sausage would taste good if you had never had actual sausage first.
So somebody hits you up. Hey, man, I want to learn to play bass lines. What's your homework assignment to them for
homework
tomorrow?
Assignment is scales. That's where you're going to start with. And then a couple of easy tunes with an easy set of chord changes. I want you to find the songs either on YouTube or find recordings of them and write out the chord changes. Even if you look them up on the internet and you understand what's going on, I want you to write them down. I want you to write them down so you see them in front of your face. This is about the only visual component you're going to get, is actually writing this stuff down and seeing, what the structure of the tune is. Because this is one of the parts about improvising, especially when you're just walking bass lines. A lot of what you're doing can just be determined by the structure of the tune. Is it 2 8-bar phrases? Is it 4 8-bar phrases? Is it AABA? Is it AABB? How the form of a tune and the structure of it will dictate to you how to put together a bass line. You know where your destination points are when you're putting together lines. And then it's a matter of actually finding a recording and playing along with the tune, and not necessarily learning the bass line that you hear in the song, but just putting something together that works as a bass line within your capabilities, within your technical ability, and something that is very obvious. It does not have to be fancy. It does not have to be fancy. And I think that's the key thing. When you're just playing bass lines and you're just holding down the gig, nothing has to be fancy. Nothing has to be showy. You don't set any kind of high bars as to, I need to be able to walk 4. I need to be able to do all this cool voice leading. Man, don't do that to yourself. Even if you just play the roots on 1 and 3, congratulations, you've put together a bass line. It may not be what you want as an end product, but it will get the job done.
Amen.
And when you start doing this stuff, really and truly, people are not trying to, they're looking for a New Orleans gig. They don't necessarily want to hire like a Wynton Marsalis on tuba. Right. They don't want that. They want someone who will come in and keep great time. And that's the other side of this coin. people start talking about bass lines and how do I improvise? How do I put together a bass line? They're really, really worried about which buttons to push, which notes to play. And the biggest chunk of the responsibility is keeping great time. You have to be focused on that all the time. It never stops. It never ends. You have to be dialed in with the drummer and the rhythm players. So if you're just starting out, don't waste all of, your brain is a computer. You've only got so many CPU cycles to go around, and you can burn up all your CPU cycles trying to figure out fancy bass lines. When you're first starting out, don't do that to yourself. Find basic bass lines that get you from A to B, and then focus on the musicians around you. That will get you called back.
Okay, now that's fantastic, man. That's gold. So now let's transition to. So that's to play bass lines, and now to take a solo. What's the progression, or what are the similarities or differences in terms of how to learn to play bass lines and be rock solid on a gig as the bass player, and then it's your turn to take a solo? Where's the overlap there? So
the overlap there is that what are the differences? The solo usually has more than half notes or quarter notes. It doesn't have to be too much of a difference. Do not think you have to double down and go Carnival of Venice at any time. You don't have to do that.
Probably shouldn't, actually.
You probably shouldn't. And I mean, that was something when I first started out in DC, there were quite a few amateur players who were completely enamored with this little duo album called Travelin' Light.
Not ringing a bell.
Yeah, not ringing a bell. Whatever happened to that guy? He's a pretty good player. You should find him and do a podcast with him. It'd probably be pretty cool.
Frank?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah. Line him up.
And today on the Brass Junkies, guitar player Frank Vignola.
There were guys who were trying to do the Sam Palafian on a gig, and that's not winning you any favors. I would go and listen to bands, and I would see guys who actually had a pretty decent impersonation going, and had multiple tonguing and multiphonics and the lip trills and all the stuff I didn't have, but you could just see it on the faces on the guys on stage. It's not working for them. So that was kind of a, because I wore mine out. I wore that cassette to the nubs, man. Yeah, I had that thing playing all the time. I loved it.
Well, and also Sam playing like that in that context, there was only two people, and it was like a show with with like a seated audience, almost always like in a large concert hall, and it had to be larger than life. And see, he was playing multiple roles at one time. So if you're just a guy in a combo or something like that, then that's going to be too much. I mean, that's not how Sam would play in that situation either.
And that was something. Yeah, imagine trying to do that in a 7-piece band.
Yeah, that is not going to end well.
Yeah, I watched it being awkward.
Yeah,
on a couple of different nights, and it's like, and that was a lesson learned. It's okay. That's how that goes.
Right.
So we won't go there. And there was, and then compounded by the fact that I don't have anywhere near those kind of chops, not even close. So even
welcome
I don't
to
even
the club.
Yeah, exactly. Why am I going to try and imitate something which it would just be laughable? So no, I will go. And if I'm going to take a solo, I'm going to do some basic stuff. If you get thrown a solo and you don't know what to do, start with the melody of the tune.
Right.
There's a ton of old historic recordings where someone will take a solo and they just start playing the melody, just playing the head over again and messing around a little bit with it. That will get you through. That'll totally get you through. In fact, some band leaders, the really old school guys, if they're throwing a solo to the tuba player, they're thrilled to just have the melody come out one more time. I've played in bands where we'll do 3 or 4 out choruses, and the first out chorus will be me playing the melody, and then it builds to the trombone player playing the melody, and then it builds again to the cornet player playing the melody. There's nothing wrong with just taking the melody of the song. If you don't remember the melody, approximate it as best you can. Use that and use those what you've remembered and what you've heard as the basis for just some really simple ideas. and then you put your voice leading back into play. You were picking notes to get through from one chord to another, from point A to point B. So do the same thing. It doesn't have to be fast, doesn't have to be fancy, and it doesn't have to land on the root like you normally would be when you're playing bass lines. Pick a point in the future. I'm going to end on the third. I'm going to play a simple thing that ends on the fifth. And then I'll take a great big breath and pick another spot coming down the line where I know where the chord is, and I'm going to end on an E natural there and just do basic stuff. Fine. It'll get you through. A lot of that is just early on when you've been thrown to the wolves and you have to play a solo. It is just a matter of survival and a little bit of experimenting and a little more experimenting and a little more survival. And again, I know that's not the concrete answer. It's not the here's the steps A, B, C, and D, boom, solo.
Well, it's as concrete
if
as
it was that
be.
easy. Huh?
Your advice is as concrete as it can be. It's not a recipe.
It's as
you
concrete
can't
as
just
it can
have numbered steps 1 through 12, and at the end you will have a cake. It doesn't.
And when you
it doesn't work.
and
that
when
way.
you sit there and you have to just build it yourself, the really fun part about this, and I know it doesn't sound fun, the idea of like just trial and error and a bunch of stuff that doesn't work, and you have to learn it that way. But when you do learn it this way, you become your own player. If I gave you 12 steps, congratulations, there's 12 steps and boom, you sound like me. That's not fun.
Right.
That's not cool. You want to be you. And that's the fun part, is discovering at some point you'll be playing a solo and you'll realize that A, B, it was in time and you sounded, like you know what you're doing. And C, you sound like you. Nobody sounds like you. Nobody else does a solo like that. Yeah. That's a great feeling.
So important. Not that this is all about monetizing at all, but if anybody wants to hire someone that sounds like Tom Holtz, they're going to hire Tom Holtz. And that's why you shouldn't, if you're going to start a podcast and you don't know what you're going to do, you shouldn't try and just do the Brass Junkies like Lance and I do. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't interview brass players.
We can't even do that, right?
Well, yeah. But
been working on it for 100 episodes. You're getting close.
We're honing in on our mission statement. Yeah, our goal is to have it written down by like episode 200. So we've actually hired some branding experts. So we're gonna really try.
I'm willing to give up on the string players now.
That's a tough call.
Yeah. So Tom, my perception is that your unique voice is based on and influenced by and a reaction to a whole bunch of shoulders that you've been standing on. And who would be on that list of influential people that you would list, right, either as soloists or as bassline folks?
Number one, Dan Parentoni. I have told this story a bunch of times. Forgive me if it sounds familiar, but we had a lesson at Arizona State where we just started playing jazz, and I don't remember, I think it was Indiana, back home again in Indiana. And we're playing our tubas, and he puts his horn down and says, "Keep playing, son," heads over to the piano and starts playing changes and just accompanying. And we made it to the end of the song, and he did a turnaround. I followed him. We had an ending. We sounded legit. And I had no idea that he played the piano. None whatsoever. And I was like, hey, where did that come from? What is this? and as it turns out, when he'd left the Army, he was in the Army band for a few years. When he left the Army, he was going back to school. He was looking to play some gigs. And there were more piano gigs than tuba gigs. So he picked up his old piano skills and went out and was playing in the clubs. It wasn't a matter of being flashy, and it wasn't a matter of trying to be the next Liberace. He just wanted to get the job done, and he did. And he's good at it. He's really good at it.
That's awesome.
And so that was the initial idea that, okay, I don't have to be a virtuoso on this instrument. I just need to be good at the job. I need to be good at the job. And then moving forward, the first time I heard the Dirty Dozen brass band, it was the Feet Can't Fail Me Now album.
Yeah.
And I wore that out too, just front to back over and over again. And Kirk Joseph just playing immaculate time.
It's a monster.
Immaculate groove. It's unbelievable to me.
Monster.
I wish I could do that. I'm working on it. I've been working on that for 30 years. I wish I could do that.
When I finally got to meet him, I was like, we were.
Oh yeah,
we were in.
Wasn't he wearing like a spectacular sweatsuit? Or was that the saxophone guy?
That was the saxophone guy. Yeah, that was Kevin. That was Kevin.
Spectacular sweatsuits are a saxophone thing.
Yeah,
it's just true.
We got to actually sit in with Dirty Dozen for a tune in Anaheim, California, like maybe 10 years ago, and I was like absolutely losing my mind. It was amazing. It was one of the highlights of my life. But then afterwards, like talking to Kirk, who's just like, he is one like laid back dude, and I was like, I can't believe I get to meet you, and he was just like, and he was very genuine. He was just kind of like, he was like, cool, man, yeah, it's nice to meet you. It's like it wasn't at all standoffish, but he was a lot more low key than I was. I was completely losing my mind that I was getting to talk to him. So yeah, you've got. So who else?
That became, Kirk Jones was the way I wanted to go. I started listening to old, a lot of the old groups. Rich Madison played some tuba on the old Dukes of Dixieland albums, and it was kind of the same thing. Let's just get the job done. And then I started realizing that when I got out here to DC, that the whole idea of time was really, really important. And I know this may not make a whole lot of sense at first. The principal tuba player in the Marine Band when I got here was Tom Lickberg. And Lickberg could play out in front of the beat better than anybody I've ever known. And there is when your tuba section in a concert band setting is all the way back in the corner, behind the percussion, behind the trombones, just the very nature of these instruments means that you're going to be back behind the beat. That's just the way it is.
Sure.
And if you don't fix that, it's going to be an ongoing thing.
Yes.
Lickberg had fixed it. And to the point where he had this, he had almost like ESP with Colonel Bourgeois. He knew exactly what the stick was going to do, and he would launch the note out in front of the stick, and that note would land at the podium right in time with the flutes and the cornets and the snare drum.
Awesome.
And there were rehearsals, I would just sit back and watch this happen and wonder, how is he doing that? I don't get it. It does not compute. And I've learned over the years to get better at that. I wish I could do it as well as he did. I will always, that will always be one of those goals you never quite get to. But after learning how to survive in the Marine Band in that old setup where we were so far back and being on top of the beat or out in front of the beat, I learned that was translating really well into the bass lines, into the jazz scene, and being the bass player in the group, because there was the rest of the band wasn't waiting for that tuba sound to come back off the ceiling and join. It was right there. And I didn't realize that was part of the equation until much later. Big plus for me getting called back, because the time was different than other tuba players, just from having that Marine Band skill set.
Boy, if you're a young tuba player, I hope you just listen to that. Actually, rewind 2 minutes and listen to that again, because it doesn't matter if we sound on time on our side of the bell or next to us or 5 feet in front of us. We have to sound on time to the podium and beyond the podium. And when you're competing, especially in a band like you're talking about with like oboes and bassoons that like they just think the note and it's like this instant sound gets into the audience's ear, or in a band that's got a trumpet, a jazz gig, whatever, we've got to line up. I had a real, not eye-opening, a reaffirming experience 2 years ago, just about, when Mallory Thompson, celebrating her 20th anniversary at Northwestern, put together an alumni brass ensemble, which was one of the best concerts I've ever been associated with in my life. It was amazing. We were doing an arrangement of Lincolnshire Posy. I don't remember which movement, second, third, that the low brass went like da 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 da, those trombones and tubas. And I played it, and anyway, we stopped, and and Mallory said, Andrew, you're a little late on the whatever, on the and a one. And I said, okay. And I thought I trust her unconditionally. She's got as good ears of anyone I have ever had standing in front of me on a podium, and I don't say that lightly. And I thought that I was on time. I didn't think that there was any issue, but I believed her. We did it again, and I was for sure on time. And she said, Andrew, you're still a little bit behind. And I went, whoa. And then I bumped it up like you just said. That was one of those where I just moved it a little further left than I thought it should be. And then we did it one more time, and then she just gave me just a little nod like that's exactly what I need, and then kept right on going. Point is that you have to sound in time rather than actually being in time on your side of the bell. And I'm not at all surprised that has translated directly to all of your jazz playing.
It's very frustrating when you first have to learn to start playing that way on every single note.
Yep.
Because it doesn't feel natural.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not buying this, find yourself some recording software where you can actually look at the waveform when you're recording, and just record yourself playing some quarter notes and look at the waveform. Look at what you've just played. You're going to see that every note tapers up from nothing. There's just a brief taper to where the tone has fully resolved itself and is getting into the microphone. There's that slice of the note where it's big and fat. I call that the fat slice when you're recording. Exactly. So when you play the note, you start a note, you have that tactile sense of the tongue coming away from the contact point in the mouth, and you hear those transient sounds of a note starting. And that's at the beginning of that little taper that you just recorded. There's whatever that amount of time is between your sensation of beginning a note and the fat slice. There's a time there before every single note. And the sad news is nobody in the audience, your conductors, nobody hears or detects any of that, the beginning of the note or the transient sounds that ramp up. All they hear is the fat slice.
Mm.
So you got to get the fat slice out to where it needs to be on time. That means get your stuff in order.
I've never heard it put like that succinctly. That's awesome. By the way, anybody with a phone, either iPhone or Android, you can get the Tonal Energy Tuner, and you can record and see the waves and see seek out the fat slice. That's awesome. That's really
great
good stuff.
Resource right there. I don't have that, but I've been using Audacity and stuff when I'm practicing and recording in the basement.
Yeah, and
it's obvious. It's obvious.
Wow.
Andrew's rapper name was Fat Slice too.
That's right.
Cool. Not a lot of people know.
Not a lot of people know.
I still have the 8-track.
That I had a rap career. Yeah, but I gave up rap when I started tuba when I was 9.
Clearly a sound financial decision.
Well, I don't know, man. Maybe. I mean, I'm doing well for a tuba player, but
that's good. That's good.
I'm not exactly living in Eminem's neighborhood, is all I'm saying. Wherever he lives, I don't think it's in my development in the DC suburbs. But I digress. A question for you: do you ever, at this point, play a solo on stage or even bass lines and then have a moment of self-awareness and then have to actually tell yourself less is more, or some example of that, like that was too busy, or is that just second nature now? Or I was wondering that.
All the time.
There you go.
All the time. Especially if there's someone I know in the audience, or some friends have come by the bar and have a few beers and just listen. And the worst time is at any kind of tuba conference or tuba event. I mean, the adrenaline kicks in. You want to do, you want to do all this stuff. And all the time I have to tell myself, dude, settle down.
Right.
Just do the job. That's all you got to do is do the job. And it's easier now because I can tell myself, hey, you have a unique voice. Nobody does what you do. Just settle down, do the job, let your voice be heard. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. And it's amazing. It's like when you're, you're trying to get that huge sound out of the horn. You're trying to get the biggest, loudest note you can get on the horn. And when you just tell yourself, okay, back off to 90% or 95% effort, let things happen a little more naturally. Boom, everything's there. Yep. I'm always telling myself to back off. Just relax.
David,
one of your, go ahead.
No, please.
One of your, you've quoted it about 1 million times. Joel Essie's quote, tension is the enemy of tone.
Yes.
I have learned that when you sit back and you relax, you're not working so hard. You focus on getting the notes out, get your breaths quicker. Everything works easier. You don't work so hard. And tension is the enemy of time as well. It totally plays into that. You relax, sit back, and just focus on the front end of the note. Boom. It solves a lot of problems.
Isn't it amazing how our instincts still, it's like the fight or flight thing, whether like that they absolutely send us in every possible wrong direction, whether you're improvising or whether you're playing in an orchestra. I'll never forget a lesson I took with David Federley when I was at NOI. He was never my actual teacher. I took, I think, 4 lessons with him in 2 summers at NOI, and yet I call him a teacher because of, like, the first lesson blew my mind, and then I got 4 of them. But
he's remarkable.
Yeah, just unbelievable. But he told me, he said, Andrew, if you ever have the pleasure of being in the final round of a major symphony orchestra audition, spoiler alert, I didn't, but if you ever had the privilege of that, he said, what you are going to want to do is run off the stage right before you play Fountains of Rome. You're going to want to run off the stage, run outside, and flip a car over by its fender. And he said, and the winner of that audition is going to go. And then he just took in a breath and just went, he said, that's it. That's what the person that's going to do is going to win. There's not going to be any car flipping or ripping sheet metal apart or anything else like that. And it's true. And that's interesting. The tension kills time. Of course it does. I just never thought about that. Look at you, man, dropping your self-deprecating ass, dropping knowledge all over the place in this thing. This has been awesome. It
is. And that was something that when I started using a little bass amp on gigs, then I found that I could really relax. I didn't have to produce a ton of sound, and I didn't have to worry about mouthpiece selection or tone, because that little Helicon I play it's one of the brightest bass horns ever built, but now it's going through an amp, and I can just run up the bass a little bit and bring it back into that big tuba sound area. Now I can just relax and just keep in time, and the whole idea of waiting for your sound to bounce off the rafters and come back to the band, that goes away. Because it's coming, once it gets to the top of the bell, your sound is coming out of an amp pointed straight forward at the front line. So now I can relax even more. And it's a whole different situation, having just not like a 8-foot tall 4x14 cabinet that's producing 800 watts of mind-crushing sound. It's just a little bread box of an amp. It's not very much, but it changed everything as far as just being able to relax, not work so hard, just focus on the basics, just do the job. Oh, it was great.
So you did.
I hate going anywhere without it now.
You did.
What was that process? What led up to you? I mean, that sounds probably to some younger players and some older players like blasphemy. Why in the world would you do that? So what was that process? How long have you been doing it? Why did you decide to do it? How did you pick an amp?
I decided to get an amp because there were just a few settings where the horn by itself is not quite loud enough. And by loud enough, it's loud enough if you're pounding and really working hard on it. I don't want to work that hard. I wanted a little bit of help. Yeah. If it's, if it's a huge club gig, there's probably a PA system and they're going to mic you and run you through the mains. You don't have to worry about that. You just, there's this huge wall of sound and you're just in there and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. But in an acoustic setting, I wanted to not work so hard, and I wanted to get a little more, lower harmonic, a little more low frequency out of this naturally bright instrument that I was playing. And I didn't want to bring a bigger tuba, which with with a pudgier sound and more delay and all the issues therein. went ahead.
Part of it's the look too. I mean, you just look cool with the Helicon.
I wanted to ask.
I
about
got
this.
lucky with that.
Yeah, tell us tell us your history with that.
Well, finish the path and then hit it with that.
Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, the amplifier. I wanted to get something. My criteria was very simple: the horn and the gear from the car to the bandstand in one trip. I am not schlepping a crap load of stuff. I'm just not doing it.
You're smarter than you appear.
I watch bass players come into gigs and they got to do 3 trips to get all their crap on stage. I'm not doing it. So I wound up paying a little bit more for this kind of a boutique bass amp from Phil Jones in St. Louis. Great stuff that he makes. And this thing is fabulous. It's 13 pounds. It's 100 watts, not a scrap more. The bass players would probably refer to it as a practice amp, but it does great on the acoustic gigs. And it's not an electric bass that makes no sound by itself that we're talking about. This is a tuba that already makes a load of sound. So you're just adding to it. It doesn't have to be huge for an acoustic gig,
right?
But it changes the color of the sound by adding more bass to the instrument. And once I started using this regularly, and realizing I don't need a whole lot, I can just add it into the mix. There's some juggling everywhere you go because you are mixing the acoustic sound of this super bright Helicon and this, potentially woofy sound of a bass amp. But once you find that, there's plenty of sound. There's plenty of sound for the band and for the audience, and you can just sit back and relax. And because it's not a huge bass amp, by the time all this gets to the back of the room, it still sounds like a tuba, which is the best part of all. I've used it on quintet gigs even. I did a quintet recital with Zach Smith's group, Beltway Brass Quintet.
Yeah.
And it was all pop stuff. It was like a history of dance music. And it was great having the options of just a little bit of reinforcement when I'm doing string bass stuff on the jazz pieces. And when we got to playing Bon Jovi and TLC, I bumped the bass up a notch. And when we went back to the 20s and did the Charleston, I turned it off completely.
Don't go chasing waterfalls, Tom Holtz.
It's a great chart.
That is a great chart. Yeah, it really is. So tell us. So we got to get to your Jens advice and then get you out of here. But we'll actually get you to the bonus episode, which I got a story to tell during. But yeah, shocker, right? I'm known to never have stories to tell. What tell us about your history with this Helicon?
So it showed up at the Army Tuba Conference years and years ago. The fine folks at Steve Dillon up in New Jersey. It had been hanging on the wall there. It was a 3-valve horn. If you are up at Dillon's and you look at the big wall of shame where everyone's picture's hanging, there's a picture of Steve in a Civil War uniform doing a reenactment gig, and he's taking a nap with his head in the bell of this horn. Someone came into the shop and said, I would buy that if it had 4 valves. And so...
What? Who says that?
Yeah, who says that? So, and at the time, he had both Matt Walters and Marty Wilkes working at the shop, and these guys are genius repairmen. And they're not sure, even they don't remember who did the work. One of them rebuilt the thing, did the overhaul to get it playable, and then the other one put the 4th valve on there. So it had been touched by both of these guys. It has no business playing as well as it should. And this thing should be hanging, you've seen it, it should be hanging at TGI Fridays with Christmas lights and deer antlers on it.
So should you, Tom Holtz.
Oh,
I know.
Hey now, with lederhosen. But they brought it to the conference and put it up on a big tall stand as just something to look at. And I was like, hey, check that out. And tried playing it, and it played way better than I thought. And after the conference was done and I hadn't acted on it, I was at work and thinking, I told our tuba player, principal tuba, Cameron Gates, I told Cameron, I should have bought that horn. I really should have bought that horn. And Cameron, who is a lot smarter than I am, looked at me and said, we're going next week. We're going to go up to Dillon's. I got a cigar box full of quarters. I'm paying the tolls. We're going.
I thought I was going to say, boy, that was cheap.
Yeah, exactly. No, he just said, we're going. We're going to do it. We went up, bought the horn, and it's been like the primary axe for a lot of stuff.
How many gigs roughly?
Oh boy. I think since I got it, if we aren't at 4 digits worth of gigs, we're close. It's a lot of gigs, man.
I was going to say,
this
is going to be a big number. Yeah. Cause you play lots and lots.
I'd have to seriously go back and do some.
I bet it's bigger than that. I bet it's into the 4 digits away.
Yeah. That would be my guess too. And it has a cup holder.
And it has a cup holder. Of course. It's incredibly necessary for Oktoberfest season.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's necessary just about any time, but it's a big help during Oktoberfest.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
I didn't realize. Yeah, it plays well. With the wireless microphone and a cup holder, if I'm playing my cards right, and the staff knows that it's coming, I don't even have to stop playing. I can walk to the bar, get a reload, and come back.
Now, if you've made it this far, this is the most valuable part of the episode.
All you have to do is figure out how to take a piss without leaving the stage, and then you're golden.
Then you're golden. Yep. I can just reload right there.
Maybe some astronaut adult diapers or something like that, and then you're off and running. Yeah, I went there. What are you going to do?
Time Out Echo German Band, sponsored by Depends.
All right.
I know there's people who think that I'm just, I'm totally like selling out and not even thinking about the musical side of this, and I just don't care anymore. Nothing's further from the truth. I take a lot of professional pride in doing what I'm doing and doing it to the best of my ability. But man, some shtick does not hurt.
Of course.
And especially when it keeps a cold beverage close by, it's a glorious, glorious thing.
Heck yeah.
Lance and I wouldn't have careers if it wasn't for shtick. That's like literally. I don't mean that any kind of like literally. Anyway.
Wish that was a joke.
Yeah. So Tom, you're a regular. You're not even just a Patreon patron. Like, these guys are friends. I like what they're doing. I want to support it. Like, you listen to every episode like shortly after it comes out. You're awesome. So
it's good stuff.
Yeah,
it's good stuff. And there's no other way to put it.
Before we started, Lance said, "So Tom, can you believe that we're almost to 100?" And Tom said, "Yeah, I can. I've been listening to episodes in the 90s." It's
listen to 96 or 97 of these damn things. I know exactly where we are.
Touche.
You guys are to be congratulated. This is good stuff.
I agree. I think we're changing lives.
Except for this one. This one leaves a lot to be desired. Good luck for whatever intern has to edit this nonsense.
We're not actually recording, Tom.
The microphone is plugged into a loaf of bread.
Hey, it's like the last time we had him on. Anyway, moving right along. So
soon.
we will tell that story, just a little bit of it, in the bonus episode, because that's a really good one. Because yes, Tom was on the Brass Junkies previously, and no, don't Google it, because you missed it, because it was never heard by anyone. So, but we'll get to that in just a second.
Boy.
So that we
it's coming. I'll bring it on. We got it.
That we we love to bust on our dear friend Jens Lindemann, who I just spoke to recently, actually, and he's doing well, but except for the chop problems that he's been dealing with now for 3.5 years at least. So, what advice do you have for our dear friend Jens Lindemann in this really desperate time of need?
A couple of years ago, I got to go up to Banff and fill in at the brass residency that he hosted up there.
Ain't that fun?
And it was a load of fun. And it was a seriously life-changing kind of thing. But I was amazed at the kind of weird stuff that he'd gotten into. It's Canada, so he had like the acupuncture going from the little old lady down in the main drag, who didn't like him. And she would there was the one day she left one of those long, narrow needles in, and he came back and was talking to us, and we're all looking like 6 inches off to the side with our heads bobbing up and down at this one little needle. He was furious when he finally pulled that thing out, because he had no idea it was there. And he was drinking this god-awful blues stuff. He called it tea. It wasn't tea. It reeked to high heaven. You could smell it coming before he even got in the door. I don't know what, he was trying anything and everything to work through this stuff.
Was it mushroom tea? Maybe he had a little psilocybin in there?
I know what mushrooms smell like, and there was some serious additions if this was mushroom-based. I'm afraid of what was going on in there. So I would say, actually, if he's going to be out and doing some playing, I would say just get yourself an amp and take it easy. Just mic up every time you go out there and play. Even on the pick, go ahead and mic that thing up and just relax a little bit and see how that helps.
Could you imagine a trumpet player showing up to a gig with an amp? I mean, like a classical trumpet player showing up to a gig with an amp. It'd
be fine. Even like with Brass Band of Battle Creek, if he's playing pick there and has an amp next to him, that would be fine. He can put a big Michigan State decal on the side. It'll be great.
Okay, hold on. This is a call. This is a call to action. If any of our listeners are especially gifted at Photoshop, I need a photo of Jens playing trumpet with an amp next to him. So I need a solo,
like a Marshall stack.
Yeah, I know.
Marshall stack.
It could be the Grateful Dead wall of sound.
With the preamp on it. Oh yeah,
whatever. Or it could be a little rinky-dink practice amp. Yeah, we need an amp. We need an amp photo.
Pig nose.
Yep. Yeah, that's good. So, well, that did not disappoint. So there you go. He just needs an amp and to take it easy. I like it. Well, Tom, this has been great. Do not go anywhere because we've got a couple of stories that are going to go each way, I'm sure, for our bonus episode, which any of you can hear for as little. See, Tom listens to all the bonus episodes, and in fact, by the time this airs, a couple of them will have already happened. But he got the behind the scenes report for the Brass Junkie, which is a new monthly feature for $3 and up patrons, and so he knows that there's some super heavy hitters that are on the way here, and he said, what the hell?
I cannot wait.
Why do I belong on this list? So, but for as little as $1 per episode, which is a whopping $26 a year, you can hear all of the bonus episodes, including this one we're about to record with our dear knucklehead friend Tom here. You can go to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies, and you can sign up, and there's even more stuff for $5 and $10, and right now we have up to $30 an episode for pledges. So thank you to all of you for doing that, and Tom, thank you for changing lives and inspiring young people and just making the world a little bit of a better place today.
Shoveling that out as always. Well done, guys.
I tried to sound sincere there. All right, that is going to do it for another episode of The Brass Junkies. You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to hear the bonus episode featuring today's guest, please visit patreon.com/thebrassjunkies to learn how you can support the show and instantly access all bonus materials, as well as gain access to a special patron-only Facebook group. The Brass Junkies is produced by the amazing, wonderful, and truly inspirational Will Houchin. The theme music was composed by Fernando Dados and performed by Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. We are at Pray for Jens on Twitter and Instagram and have a Facebook page at facebook.com/prayforjens. You can find out more about the Brass Junkies and all the other Pedal Note Media podcasts at pedalnotemedia.com. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.